Okay, we're live.
Yep.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is the March 9th, 2022 meeting of the Village of Mamaroneck Planning Board. I'm going to take attendance for the minutes. We have with us our members of the Planning Board, Richard Littman, Ellen Styler, Sidney Goldstein, and Seamus O'Rourke, and myself. We also have the Building Inspector, Frank Tavolacci, and Brittany O'Neill, our Land Use Board Secretary. We have our land use attorney, Teresa, I don't know, I always want to say Bakner. Some people say Bakner, some people say Backner, but you say Backner, right?
I say Bakner. You had it right.
I had it right the first time. John Keller, our consulting engineer, Ashley Lay and Jason, and it's Lai, Ashley Lai and Jason Mencher from AKRF, our consulting planners, and Susan Oakley, our landscape architect consultant. Okay, that seems like the gang's all here. Before we get into tonight's agenda, I do have a couple of announcements. Oh, and I forgot to ask the planning board something when we were in the pre-meeting. It wasn't a pre-meeting, it was just waiting to go live. First of all, an announcement, and I think if we have some people here who are here to listen to Van Rant's Place, you'll be interested in this announcement. The applicant for 715 Mamaroneck Avenue has withdrawn their application and decided not to pursue the project. So that one is off everybody's list. And planning board members, did you see the email about the screen for the courtroom? I have to comment back to the villages. Anybody have any comments on for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, the governor's executive order to expand the open meetings law to virtual meetings expires the middle of this month. Our next meeting will probably be a hybrid meeting with some of us in person in the courtroom with digital applications and no digital way to read them. So the village is installing screens and making some changes to the electronics in the courtroom. So nobody has any comments. I'll answer the clerk treasurer's office back and tell them we're good to go on that one. Okay. Okay, I did attendance, I did the announcements, and now brings us to the first real item on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes from January 26, 2022. Does anybody have any comments on this?
I have two small comments.
Go for it.
One is hardly matters. There's a typo on page 2. Instead of shared and overlay, it's shared tan overlay. The only substantive comment that I had is I would like to note in the Beth Evans section that Ms. Evans confirmed that although the wetland was staked in 2010, it was revisited in 2019 for no changes. And that was all I had.
Okay. And the typo is in which section on page 2?
Right at towards the top of page 2, it's shared tan overlay instead of shared N overlay. It hardly matters.
Yeah, I see it, yeah. Okay. It's right under the subsection of Jacqueline Tyler. It's the first sentence under that. Anybody else have any other comments? Okay, then can I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second. I'll second.
Okay, Ellen? Let's vote on it. Ellen?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Seamus?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay. That brings us to the first item on the agenda, which is a continued site plan review of 572 Van Rant's Place. I know there's been some question of why this is still being scheduled as a site plan review. We don't have a complete application as yet. The applicant has been notified that they're missing a landscape plan. And we're also still in the midst of our seeker review. At the last meeting, I guess we declared ourselves to be lead agency. And this is the first time the applicant is back to us before that. We declared our intent to be a lead agency. So we have to declare the lead agency and continue with our secret. Which is, Ashley, I guess the best way for us to do this would be to have the applicant present to us the changes that they've made in their plans since, yes, I see everybody from AKRF shaking their heads in unison. Okay, so Brittany,
Promote, Kristen.
if you could promote the AKRF, I mean the Van Rans Place team. It's been a long day. And present to us the changes that you've made since the last meeting on this. And Kristen?
Hi. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Board. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Good to see you all again. Happy New Year. I haven't seen you since.
It's right. It's March.
I know. It's been a few months. So Kristen Motel, for the record, from Cuddy and Fader on behalf of the applicants, 572 Van Rant LLC. We do have our whole team here tonight available to answer questions. That includes John Sullivan from Sullivan Architecture, as well as Jerry Ryan and Brendan Ahern, who are representing the applicants. We have Michael Stein from Hudson Engineering, and Dan Connors from Eris Energy Solutions, who can explain some of the resiliency features that we're proposing going forward. And as you know, we last appeared for a presentation in September, and we did have an informal appearance before Harbor Coastal in November just to get some comments. And I would like to just do a summary as you had requested earlier, because I think aside from just a reintroduction to refresh everyone's recollection here, there have been some pretty significant modifications made to the proposal to address comments that we heard from the Planning Board and that we heard from Harbor Coastal over the last few months. So without further ado, I'll provide a brief presentation, and I'm going to also turn it over to John Sullivan when I'm finished, just to walk you through the plans briefly. So the applicants, as you're aware, are proposing to replace the existing residential structure on the property, and they would like to construct a sustainable 5-story multifamily residential building. That building is proposed to have 10 units, 6 1-bedrooms and 4 2-bedrooms, and parking will be provided within a garage on the ground floor of the building. So the premise is currently zoned as RM3, which is a multifamily district, and multifamily uses are a principal use. So there is no special permit that's required for this proposal. And as everyone is aware, the project is within the flood zone. It's the AE flood zone with a base flood elevation of 25.8. As you are also aware, the existing structure on the property does not comply with the Village of Mamaroneck floodplain development code and FEMA requirements for residential structures in the flood zone. Also notably, there is no existing stormwater management infrastructure on the property. So the proposed building is going to be a significant improvement over existing conditions. The building will be raised above the base flood elevation, and I'll have John touch on that in a little bit more detail. We are proposing to also increase the flood volume storage on site compared to existing conditions. And aside from obviously fully complying with the village floodplain development requirements and the FEMA requirements, the applicant is actually going to exceed those standards in several ways. So the first way is that the building, when I say it's sustainable, it's actually going to be self-powering. So it can provide power to the residents during a complete village power outage. And the idea behind that, aside from the sustainability feature, of course, is to keep occupants safe without a need for them to immediately evacuate in an emergency situation. So not only does that protect residents of the building, it also reduces the demand on emergency responders during a significant flood event. And Dan Connors can touch on this a little bit more when I'm finished, but in short, the building will be powered by a rooftop fuel cell system. which is powered off of natural gas infrastructure that has an undergrounding supply connection. So when I say it will be, for the most part, uninterrupted during significant events, that is why. The building is also going to be designed with safe evacuation measures to aid emergency responders. So we heard Harbor Coastal loud and clear, and the members of the public, the planning board. We have redesigned the project to add an emergency door in the stairwell at elevation 33 above the base flood elevation to enable emergency egress in the event that there is a significant flooding event. That door leads out to a platform, an 8-foot wide roof area that will serve as a queuing area in the event that residents need to be rescued by lifeboats during a significant event. That 8-foot wide roof area will also serve as a covered entry to the lobby. So it's going to look seamlessly from the architecture of the building, but it does serve a very important function. The building is also being designed to safely withstand flooding events and be resilient. So a lot of comments we received from the Harbor Coastal Commission had concerns about repeat damage to a building due to flooding. The electrical, the mechanical, and all the lighting features will be located in the ceiling level above base flood on the first floor at an elevation of 31 to prevent any damage. The parking will also be fully enclosed to prevent vehicles from any remaining vehicles, which obviously the applicant is going to take measures to ensure as many vehicles as possible are not on the property during a flood event. But any vehicles that remain will be contained on site because the parking area will be fully enclosed. The building has flood vents to increase the total volume storage of the site and also provide for additional flooding relief. Elevators are proposed to be parked at the second and third floors for safety and to avoid repeat damage. The lobby and all of the features at grade will also be constructed with flood resilient materials, so we're minimizing the need for repairs. As I had mentioned before, there's no stormwater infrastructure on site, and we're proposing a situation that will not increase stormwater runoff. We're going to also reduce the building footprint from what currently exists, and the stormwater management infrastructure will reduce downstream erosion potential as well. Of course, there's also some green features proposed here, such as the rooftop solar installation, electric vehicle charging stations for the residents, as well as the state-of-the-art fuel cell system that I had mentioned. And with that, actually, John, I think it would be a good time to turn it over to you to walk through the plans and show these design measures just in a little bit more detail. Piece here.
Great. Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? See me, I assume? Great. Hello again. I know it's been a few months since we met previously. And Madam Chair and board members, if you'd like, as Kristen said, I'd be more than happy to go through the design of this. I know we discussed it at the previous meeting, which hard for me to believe that was in October, like 5 months ago already. But in any event, here we are. And Kristen touched on a couple of the adjustments that have been made since the last time that we met with all of you. And they mainly had to do with comments that this board made, as well as she said, as the Harbor Coastal Commission addressed with us. And we're all keenly in tune to the flood issues that exist in this area and how best to address them. And, you know, here we have a building proposal that is on a very small site, 6,500 square feet. So right off the get-go, we all know that that is about 1,000 square feet less than what the minimum permitted site area is. It's a given, as well as the site width, 65 feet, 75 feet is the minimum lot width. So here we have like a small little postage stamp almost, if you would, of a parcel that's adjacent to an existing building that is somewhat in scale with what we're proposing to do. So those two issues, create somewhat of a challenge for us. But we believe that what we're trying to suggest here is to add an improvement to the street corridor. And absent from the building that exists there today, which for all intents and purposes is a small little residential structure. And maybe what we could do is my associate Greg Dallop, I think that he's on here. Is he not? If he's not, can you guys ask him or include him on what we're doing? Because Greg, my associate, will bring up our slides and be easier to see as we walk through this.
So we need to have screen sharing with Craig.
I can get access to screen share.
I see Greg's name there.
Yes, you have access.
Great, thank you, Brittany.
No problem.
So Greg, if you're on there, can you log in and bring up our slides? Great. Okay, terrific. So as you can see here, here's a drawing that's a composition of what we're speaking about. Obviously, in the center, the colored portion of this plan is a site plan. It shows the parameters of the site, and it indicates through a sort of terracotta color the portions of the building that are just that, a building on grade. Clearly, as you can see, there are no dwelling units proposed to be at grade, which is approximately at elevation 21. Obviously, it varies a little bit as the site slightly slopes. But what we're proposing here is nothing more than an entry structure that brings you up to the second, third, fourth, and fifth floors of this building. You can see that the parking lot has on grade 12 spaces. I saw a memo somewhere about a parking structure. There's not a proposed parking structure here. These spaces are on grade. And you can even see from the coloration here that really none of them are completely even covered by the building. They're partially covered, a few of them, but the ones toward the rear are not even covered parking spaces. This section of the site that's white, in addition to the terracotta color, is actually the structure of the building above. And we have added one thing since the last thing that you saw here regarding parking, and that's the two rear parking spaces all the way to the back of the site that we're proposing to put a lift in, an on-grade lift, probably something similar to maybe what some of you have seen in Manhattan, for example. If you go into Manhattan and you see these parking lots that have like a little lift on it, these are like nothing more than a two-tier parking lift. We pick up two additional parking spaces. Clearly, these spaces are assigned. You rent an apartment in this building, you'll be assigned a parking space. And depending upon your vehicle, these two spaces back here may very well work perfectly fine if you have a Mini Cooper or VW Bug, or maybe some classic Triumph, or a smaller car today. If you have two Escalades, that might be a little bit challenged. You don't get then a lift spot. But the point is that we can accommodate spaces on site for 14 people rather easily. Now, back to our point here about the site. You can see the front of the property that, we've illustratively have drawn some landscape material here. Clearly, we have not submitted a proper landscape plan, as was alluded to. Clearly, one will be submitted at a time. But we're showing you that there's a minimal amount of landscape material on the site. Today, there's not a single tree or a plant on this site. There are weeds along the back of the property line. That's it. It has a building, it has a gravel area and a lawn area in the back. So the street trees that we show will be new. Any landscaping that's on the site clearly is new. Very much the entrance to this building along this little 8-foot strip along the left side of the site plan, as you see, is a private internal courtyard. Originally, it was all open, but as Kristen just alluded to a moment ago, a portion of it now will be covered. And it'll be covered by a flat roofed area that is actually serving as the potential rescue platform for the residents on the second floor. Or where Greg is pointing to right now. You can see where we've installed a door in the stairwell, which is right here, that goes out onto that platform, which then will allow a person, or persons, to walk to the front of the building, and if they needed to be or wanted to be rescued, they could be. We kind of came upon this through conversation with this board as well as the Harbor Coastal Commission, and we believe that we've been able to at least address this potential emergency egress during a flood. As Kristen alluded to a moment ago, remember that the second floor, which is the first floor of any residential use here, is 12 feet above grade, which is well above the flood areas here. So honestly, all of the units in this building are above any flood elevation. Good Lord, if we ever had another storm that got up that high, well, then maybe someone on the second floor might get a little water in their place. I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen, right? But we at least have a level of comfort to know that this building is at least elevated enough to protect the residents that live there. There are no mechanical rooms. There is not a cellar in this building. There are no mechanicals. Any of the mechanical entrance infrastructure that enters this building, electrically mainly, because this will be an electrical building, go up to the roof. And we can have a conversation, and Dan will describe later, and I know we touched on this previously with all of you, that this company, DGB here, is into an amazing, excellent environmental systems that are new to the world, and that can be accommodated through fuel cells, as well as solar panels. You can see them up on our upper roof over here in the lower right-hand corner. So there are a lot of real interesting environmental introductions that we're making here potentially for this building and the residents that will live here, which are 10 units, 3 on a floor and 1 unit on the top floor. There is an open space roof area up here. I agree with the comments that I saw that it probably really doesn't qualify as the quote open space. For the number of units that we have in this building, a quarter of this entire site would have to be designated as open space. Clearly, that's probably not, at least in my opinion, not really necessary on a small urban little infill site, which is really what this is. And more importantly, as you all know, this is directly across the street from a park. So while we're providing some outdoor sitting area, recreation area for the tenants of this building, yeah, it probably doesn't meet the total requirement of the village's requirements for open space. We think that this plan and proposal has some real strong, nice merits, both environmentally speaking, as Kristen even alluded to. Think about it. Today, you have a building on this site that gets flooded out all the time. There was no accommodations on the site whatsoever for stormwater retention. We're putting in a system here that will retain some water. We're putting in a building that elevates all the residents well above any floodplain elevation. We're building a structure that is highly sustainable. And we're going to improve the street corridor, consistent with what exists here today, at least on one side of the building. Greg, bring up the next slide, please. These are the elevations of our building. The upper left is the front elevation. The horizontal lines you see on the bottom here is an overhead door grate, if you would, that gives the privacy and security for the parking on site. And you can see the 4 levels of residential units above. To the extreme left, you can see above the entrance gate a railing, and that's simply there for the protection of potentially those who may need to be out on that little roof covering here to get out of the building in case of an emergency. The other elevations are somewhat self-understandable. The one on the right shows, if you can faintly see, Greg, if you could point with the cursor to where that exit door is, that emergency exit door, it's right there, out onto that roof that then goes across. The doors you see on the bottom are the entrance to the lobby for the building. So these elevations are somewhat consistent with what you see again, adjacent to this. Let's look at the next, Greg. The next slide, these are existing photographs. You can see the building that exists there today. It was a house. It has, I believe, 2 apartments in it. I may be wrong on that, by the way. I mean, our clients, I'm not quite sure, but they're rental units in the building today.
You're correct, John.
You can see that it's pretty barren. There's not a lot going on here. And from both of these. And the reason why we put these up is because the next 2 slides, which we took photographs and superimposed our rendering into the streetscape. Greg, there's the same views from the bottom and the top. We tried, obviously, not to mimic. I wouldn't do that to the building next to it, but the scale of the building is consistent. The same height, the same concept of a plinth with a building sitting above it with 4 stories. And thankfully, we've been able to address the safety, particularly regarding floodplains of this. And, you know, listen, we can put the street trees here that you see on the front of this building. Again, we only have 65 feet of width with a driveway intersection, so we can at least accommodate 2 street trees here, as well as some vegetation along the very back edges of the property. But it's really an infill site and consistent with what exists there. And I like to believe that it's a highly sustainable building that we're going to propose and an improvement to the streetscape and the street corridor. Clearly, we will get to do a landscape plan. There wasn't one proposed yet. As you all can see, that we have some variances that we need to request here, in part because of the size of the lot to begin with, the width of the lot. I'll point out that we do need a side yard setback. Originally, we didn't. If you look at our previous submission to you, you'll see that we didn't need a side yard setback. We now, because we provided this little roof extension and that emergency access, yeah, I guess that covered portion of that areaway, that's the entrance there, is a portion of the building. But the reality is that the building is set back at the right dimension. I would think that type of accommodation would be viewed upon favorably, and that type of variance would be looked at favorably. The others, we can discuss and go through this. But as I said, I think that there's some merit to this as a general overall streetscape improvement. We're going to provide a mere 10 units. 20% of them will certainly be affordable to meet your requirements for that. And the introduction of potentially a model building that addresses some strong sustainability and energy use. Guess what? I don't care that Con Ed has a moratorium on gas. I don't need it right now. I'm going to look past that. So in any event, this is where we are with this. We hope that the village will look at us with some understanding and acceptability. Kristen, I mean, maybe we want to have Dan. Dan, are you here with us? Because Greg, if you want to bring up the next slide. This lets us speak a little bit about what I was speaking about the fuel cells and how that process works.
Yeah, Dan, do you want to just say a few things about how the fuel cells will work?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to do that. And I promise I will be brief. So there's only 2 exhibits that I have to show tonight, aside from being available to field questions as they may arise. The first is our cover sheet, if you will, to this story. And what it basically says are the 3 things that I think Kristen and John had mentioned earlier, that the building is going to be self-sustaining from an energy standpoint. That is that its energy capabilities are designed so that over the course of a year, the kilowatt hours that we can self-generate by way of the fuel cells and the solar system are sized to be equal to the anticipated energy consumption of the occupants and 4 EV charging stations as well. And that's quite significant because those EV charging stations almost double the consumption. So really the building is going to power the building and some EV charging, which is quite substantial. Secondly, it is designed so it will be resilient and it's really an always on. So the grid goes down and the fuel cells are designed so that they may take a little recover for a few moments, but they'll be back online almost instantaneously. And we're working with that right now to minimize the hiccup, if you will, in the transition. The third thing is that this will substantially decarbonize from the typical energy arrangement. If you could just throw the next slide up, and this may be difficult for the users to see, but that big blue bar on the left is what a typical building of this nature would consume and emit as greenhouse gases over the period of a year. And that blue bar is now shrunk by 73%. That's the number. You may not be able to read it on this sheet, but there's a 3/4 reduction. The solar in this case contributes some. That's the yellow portion on the top. That's nice. There's not a whole lot of room for solar on this building, so the cells are actually picking up the majority of the decarbonization, including the top part of that green section is by way of the electricity. And then they also produce some byproduct heat, which further reduces the need for the natural gas. And when you include that free heat, if you will, there's another little bonus in the carbon reduction. So we believe this is going to be our state-of-the-art building. It's new, it's pioneering, but it's all backed up by very successful operation with these products in the field elsewhere. That's it, and thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
So at this time, I think we would be happy to take any questions from the planning board. All the changes that were made over the course of the last several months really demonstrate a building that's resilient to flooding. And our intention is it can really positively impact development within the flood zone and set a standard moving forward for what is resilient and what should be constructed in the future.
Okay, thanks very much. That was helpful to understand the changes that you've made. Okay, Ashley from AKRF, is there anything that you would like to add to their presentation based on your review of what we have so far?
So we did prepare a memo reviewing the revised application. We did identify a number of variances that are required. I did hear the applicant speak to those. The planning board does not have the ability to waive the requirements for things like open space, so that would need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And the ideas or the thoughts that the architect was sharing can be presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
For those of you who are wondering, what's going on from a process point of view, the zoning board can't do their work until we make a secret determination. So that's what we're doing now. We're working on the secret determination. Tonight, we're going to declare ourselves lead agency. We sent out all the notices and whatnot. And then the applicant will go to zoning for the variance application for the variances. And as Ashley just mentioned, there were many. And then they'll come back to planning board for a site plan and a public hearing at that time. So that's the process. And it's going to take a little bit of time. And I know people are anxious to speak on this matter, but the things are, as you can see, things are changing, and we'll have the appropriate process and people will get an opportunity to speak on the matter when the time is right after the variances are either granted or not granted, which that'll change everything. So, okay, we'll just keep moving. Okay, thank you, Ashley. John Kellard from Kellard Sessions, do you have anything that you want to add to? I know you gave us a somewhat lengthy memo commenting on the revised plans.
Yes, I provided a memo Obviously, there's some very positive changes to the building as it relates to the floodplain issues. One item I'm just not clear on, and maybe John can provide a little more detail on it, is the garage itself. I think Kristen mentioned that it's a totally enclosed garage, but it appears that it is still open on the sides and at the rear. And my concern is that we don't lose floodplain volume because we're creating an enclosed garage.
Yeah, John, if I could, thanks for asking that. You're correct. Maybe we should not use the reference to a garage because it is not enclosed. Yes, if we can, you know what? Hey, Greg, can I ask you to put the site plan back up, and maybe I could just walk around it and it's a little easier to explain. Obviously, there's a footprint of a building on the site. I guess we need to do a screen share again. Brittany, do we need to do that? Oh, there we go. Okay. So, great. Thanks, Greg. Just zoom in a little bit there. So, as you guys can see, the property is a rectangle. And what we're proposing to do is that along the right side, which today, the right side, I guess this is, what direction is that? I don't even know. I think that's probably the northeast side, but that's up against an existing wall of the parking structure of the building to our right. So that wall stays there. Across the back, we're simply proposing to put a fence. Not a solid fence. Frankly, hadn't thought about what the fence is really, but maybe a 6-foot high fence that just gives some security to the site. That fence would then continue down the left side property to a point where you see a solid line. That then becomes a solid wall, probably a concrete wall that's stuccoed or some sort of finish on it. And that's only because I want to create this 8-foot wide, almost almost very European type of alley landscape entry area that's private to the residents. The terracotta color is the footprint of the building. The sort of tan color that you see on the site is the portion of the site that's completely exposed to the sky. The little black sort of squares you guys see on the plan are columns, structural columns supporting the floor above. Hence, that when you enter the site through a gate, that would be, water could go through. It's not a solid garage door. It's just a security gate that it goes up to provide just that security for the cars on site. But there are, you can see the parking spaces designated on the site. And as I said earlier, only a portion of the, like roughly half, call it that, of the parking spaces on the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and one where the handicap spot is, a portion of those spaces are covered by the building. The other portion is exposed to the air. So the site, while it's secure in terms of a fence or a wall or an existing wall on the adjacent building, is really open, only covered by the footprint of the upper portion of the building.
Yeah, okay,
It
John.
qualifies as a garage. And so it's on grade parking.
So we have the rear of the site and a portion of the side that's open, so that floodwaters can still flood that garage area,
Correct. Water,
which is fine. We just don't want to lose that floodplain volume. And that I wasn't sure of whether it was completely enclosed or not.
Right, which is why, John, somewhere I believe we did a calculation that, again, the footprint of our building, the terracotta area there, and I know we show it, there's a little terracotta area in the front there. It's really just nothing more than a block walled in trash enclosure. That footprint is less footprint than the house that's there today.
Correct.
So you're right. Any floodwaters would easily enter that, the garage door, grate, if you would, flood the site. If someone's car was in here, it's going to be flooded. One plus for this is, though, the car is not going to float off site. It'll stay contained in the property.
Thanks, John.
I don't know if that's a benefit for that potential auto owner, but whatever.
Okay, and Michael indicated that the floodplain volume would actually increase slightly. And in our memo, we asked if Mike can share those calculations with us so he can
Yes, correct.
verify it.
And my apologies, I thought that had been included, so we can definitely include that in the next submission.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And clearly, the street trees, any vegetation on the roof, any vegetation in the alley, any vegetation along the back and the front will have to be indicated on a landscape plan. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you can basically do that after you come back from zoning, right? We don't need that. Do we need that before zoning? Before zoning? Nobody's saying. So
No, I think that can wait until they come back.
and wait until you come back. Okay, okay. Okay, and then of course there was a memo from the Westchester County, which I believe was shared with you, the Westchester County Planning Board by county section of the County General Municipal Law. They review projects such as this. They had some comments with regards to some things they would like to see in the building. This came a while ago, but you all weren't here. So I think you probably, hopefully got it with regards to, plugins for e-bikes and stormwater management, affordable housing. But the affordable housing issue is going to probably be raised at zoning because you're asking for more units than the zoning code allows. So that's something that you will face down the road. Any members of the planning board have any questions at all with regards to anything you've heard tonight or read?
Can someone let us know during Hurricane Ida, what was the floodwater depth at that site?
Mike, can you answer that? But I kind of thought I heard you all offer to us once before that it was about 7 or 8 feet above grade, which would be at elevation 20, 28 or 29.
Yeah, John, that's consistent with my discussions with the applicant based on what happened to this existing structure on site. The full basement was flooded and a significant portion of the first floor as well. So that's consistent with what I've heard too.
Okay, because while we all hope and pray we're not going to have more flood events, that's not the truth. The truth is that the flood events are coming more frequently and more severely. And so, it's good that you're looking at this being the habitable space being significantly above the base flood elevation, but it's not the reality of the trend here. And clearly that site is going to flood in less than 100-year storms. I think it's going to flood fairly regularly. So I am particularly interested in what Chief Costa has to say, not just about this building, but at some point, if we keep incrementally stuffing more people into a hazardous area, it's going to reach more of a tipping point than what it is right now. You couldn't get a lifeboat out to any of the buildings. The buildings were surrounded by water. They had moats around them. Pity the poor person who runs out of insulin or has a heart attack. The emergency responders just can't get there as hard as they try. So I'm hoping we can get in touch with Chief Costa and ask about the incremental capacity that this would be adding to an already strained first responders. And I do, as lovely as the building sounds in terms of green infrastructure and being self-sustaining, and that is very important, I am very concerned about increasing capacity, adding more people, putting them in harm's way, putting the first responders in harm's way, and just cramming people into the floodplain. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But I have an open mind. I have a question about the parking, because I think that's somewhat intriguing, that the 2 spaces on the lifts. I know our parking definition has to deal with you have to be able to access the vehicles at all times. And is that possible with the two cars on the lifts? And do you otherwise meet all the criteria and the requirements of the size of the spaces that is specifically set out in the code?
Sizes of the spaces are addressed and they're correct. There are only two lifts, right? They would be assigned to the same party that has the parking space below, if need be, obviously. So they would have control of the lift and how they would access their vehicle from above and bring it down and move their car out of the way, and et cetera. It's just a means in which to get, two more parking spaces on the site that are very achievable.
It'd be very similar to doing tandem parking spaces where you have a car front and rear.
Right.
Same person is going to be owning both vehicles, so they're going to be accessing, have the keys, pull one car out, then pull the second car out.
Right. And by the way, Ms. Goldstein, I spoke to Chief Costa, and he and I spoke a bit. I forwarded him these drawings, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago. I'm just trying to remember. And I know he has them, he's going to review them. He mentioned to me that he was going to have a discussion with Frank. But I haven't heard back from him. And so I suspect that we'll have a discussion about all this, and I'll show him what we're doing and how we've tried to address the emergency, exit issue and the height of the building, et cetera, et cetera. So, but he at least has them, and I've spoken to him. So we'll hear back from him soon.
That's great. Frank, if you can kind of carry our concerns to that conversation that you have with Chief Costa, that would be terrific.
Obviously, emergency egress and ability to evacuate people or ability to get to people are going to be part of our secret review. So this is something that's timely. This is information that we're going to need sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and just a note on that too, there are 3-bedroom units on the property right now. And an entire unit, a whole family had to be evacuated in Hurricane Ida. So it's not really like we're going from, 2 or 3 people living on site to a substantial number more. It's really an incremental increase because the capacity is a substantial number of people right now. And the goal is to get them into a safe structure so that they do not need to continue being evacuated from the property.
Good point. Okay. About the natural gas hookup, because there is a moratorium that Mr. Sullivan did mention and then said he wasn't too worried about it. Is there gas hookup to the building now? Is that why you're not worried about hooking up to natural gas at the building now? I see Dan.
I'm hopeful that we don't need a gas connection for the new building. Honestly, Madam Chair, I don't know the building that's there today. And I honestly don't know that there is a gas connection. I would assume there is just by the type of structure that's there, but I don't know.
Can you speak to that?
Isn't natural, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the write-up did say that the natural gas would be fueling the fuel cells.
Yes.
Right. So if there is no natural gas there already, and or if there isn't, it's not sufficient for your purposes, then that would mean a new hookup with Con Ed, and there's a moratorium now. But you think there's other ways you can fuel the fuel cells?
Let me jump in very quickly. So yes, indeed, the fuel cells run off of natural gas today. My recollection, there is actually an existing natural gas hookup today there. And the additional natural gas load, when you factor in the very high efficiency of these units, is compared to today's consumption is actually quite a bit lower per occupant, certainly. There's one other environmental attribute, and that is it is a little futuristic, admittedly, but we've all heard nowadays about green hydrogen. The fuel cell actually does run on hydrogen internally, and this particular fuel cell can handle 20 or 30% hydrogen in the natural gas when such green hydrogen is widely available from our gas companies. So it's somewhat future-proof in that respect, and that would be a further decarbonization as well.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that topic? So on your chart, I don't know what the grid was. I mean, New York has a renewable portfolio standard to get to 50%, I think by 2030 or something. And so I don't know what it's based on. I don't know if I really need that answer, but from an environmental and safety perspective, I assume you effectively have a power plant on a very small scale on this site. It's going to be converting natural gas to hydrogen and then converting that to electricity. So is there a permitting process for that? Is there on-site pollution instead of pollution that's out at a power plant that ultimately will be more and more green as the grid progresses? What about the risk of a fire or of a leak? Is this the type of installation that exists in very densely populated, residential neighborhoods? Just maybe a little understanding of that.
Yeah, I'll try to quickly answer in bullet form to not occupy so much time, but there are currently over 2,500 of these units running successfully for more than a decade in Europe. There's some we're now introducing into the US market, but these are operating in people's homes and small businesses in Europe today and have done so for a decade or more. And the economics are now making more sense where they run here. Yes, there is a permitting process. It is somewhat akin to a gas appliance. Except that we must have an interconnect with the utility. And we have done that successfully on Long Island as part of our hybrid inverter. That's the magic box that allows us to toggle off grid. So yes, there is a fire safety review, and that's been completed successfully in a town on Long Island in one of our early residential units so far.
And would this be the first installation of your knowledge in Mamaroneck and maybe in Westchester County?
It depends when this goes forward. It's possible, but we're also looking at several other sites, some of the properties that the owners own as well.
And then what about on-site pollution versus, a grid that sites power plants and is getting only more and more greener? I mean, what is the chemical process?
Understood. So comparing what we have today, the carbon coefficient of the fuel cell is less than half of what the New York State average coefficient is. This jurisdiction of the electric utility has a higher than average carbon coefficient, actually. And then when you lock in the value of the byproduct heat, which definitely this facility can use for domestic hot water heating, that greenhouse gas emission is even better. Furthermore, there's no NOx, and no SOx because it's not combustion. So it really is a strong environmental advantage over traditional central power plants. Plus, you don't have to distribute it and lose 10%. That's factored into the logic as well, and it's resilient.
Okay, yeah, that all makes sense, and I get that it's very efficient. Just final, very specific question: what is the byproduct? Like, is it going to be like running a car all the time on the roof of this building on in Mamaroneck on site, right downtown?
So the primary byproduct is CO2. Only half of what you would have if you use that same unit of natural gas in our central power plant today.
Okay, but yeah, okay. So it's a CO2 byproduct that's existing on site instead of off site at a power plant somewhere down the transmission line, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And by the way, that will be diminished further when there's hydrogen in our pipelines. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
I was going to ask, are there any noise decibels on that unit on the roof?
Yeah, the unit is whisper quiet. The fuel cell itself has no moving parts except for a small fan. You could touch the side cabinet of it and it feels a little warm to the touch, but that's all. And, the dB number is in our literature. It's probably something in the 30s. It's just about a whisper.
Okay. Anybody else? No one else? All right, it seems like we have to try to get some information from the fire chief. And then we have a couple of open questions from the stormwater that in John's memo that would be helpful for us for our secret review. Does that help sum it up? Ashley, am I, yeah.
Yeah, I think the next step is for the planning board to declare lead agency, and then the applicant can go back and provide responses to all the comments that they received from the planning board and the planning board's consultants, and make a submission. And then depending on how that falls out, you could potentially make your secret determination at the next meeting, or, the meeting after they make their submission.
Ashley, just a quick question. You've reviewed the part 1 of the EAF. Is there any information that's still needed in connection with that?
I don't believe so. I'll double check, but I don't believe there was anything outstanding there.
Okay, so we need to declare ourselves lead agency for secret purposes. So I need a motion from someone to declare the planning board the lead agency for.
Don't move.
Second,
Okay, let's take a vote. Ellen,
Yes.
Seamus,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Cindy,
yes.
and I vote yes. All right, so that's done. Does the applicant have any questions for us?
We would request that a public hearing be scheduled at this time so that we can make the required notifications and prepare the supplemental materials and submit them in a timely fashion, while also preparing the zoning board materials, of course, too.
We did have a conversation about this, we were going to schedule a public hearing tonight, but given the fact that we need to make a secret determination before you go to zoning, and the likelihood of you coming back from zoning within the secret timeframes are probably pretty low, that we decided, and I think it's the right decision, to do the public hearing when you come back from zoning.
So a secret determination will be made before we appear before the zoning board of appeals? Is that what?
That's the way it works. It has to be.
Right.
So we make a secret determination.
Correct. So the next appearance that we have with this board will not be a public hearing. But in
Correct.
terms of us getting our materials in a timely manner so we can make the next meeting agenda, I guess my question is that the first meeting in April? Or what date should we be targeting to come back before this board?
If you can get everything in to get here for the first meeting in April, because the deadline for the 23rd of March is already gone.
Right.
There's no mailing required for you to come back to the board. So all you need to do to come back is update your sign. And you could just use duct tape and a Sharpie.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have to have a whole new sign printed, right?
Sure. Yeah. We just want to make sure we get the materials in timely. So,
Right,
okay,
and-
we'll target that meeting. Thank you.
Right. And then depending on our determination of significance, then, you'll either have to work through some of that, or if it's a neg deck, you go on to zoning for the variance review, which, they only meet once a month, so that will take some time. And then you'll come back to us for the full site plan review, at which point you'll need all the landscaping material and anything that changed while you're at zoning resubmitted to us. Okay? All
Right. And I guess the only thing I'd like to say, Kristen, is make sure we have everything that you would want us to have to make a secret determination. Okay?
That's a good point.
Good.
Right.
Thank you, Teresa.
Quickly, give us all the information we need. Right.
Copy that.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, I think that wraps up 572 Van Ransford today.
And by the way, Mr. Chairman, just thank you very much for letting me know that 715 was withdrawn. That's the first I heard about it, so.
Well, they did it last week and I heard about it last night through the grapevine, but it was confirmed today, so I could announce it today because I know there's people watching this that were concerned about it. But Michael, we've missed you. We really have.
Well, that's one of my applications to find out. And that was, I was hearing it.
There's another one in your application. Was that they had to purchase that property, right? Was that under?
No, I don't believe so. I think they were contracted.
Yeah, the somebody notified us that they decided not to pursue the project. So I guess it's still for sale. The building's still for sale then. But,
So thank you. Have a great evening.
okay.
Take care, everyone.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you, everybody. Very coherent presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is a new application. This is the first time they're here before us for 1037 Oaks Lane. The applicant proposes to install an in-ground pool. So we can promote the spokesperson for, we don't take comment, we're not taking comments. And in fact, can you turn the chat off, Brittany? The chat should be off. We can't use the chat during a public meeting for open meeting law purposes because they're not recorded. So we can't use chat. You got to remember to turn it off. Oh, no, next time we'll be in person. Thank you. Okay. Can we get rid of the chat on the screen? Okay, we have someone for 1037 Oaks.
Yep, I'm here. It's just my video's not working for some reason.
Oh, so
So my name is Angela. I'm from Dan Sherman Landscape Architects, representing our clients at 1037 Oaks Lane. We are proposing an in-ground swimming pool in the rear yard. They have an existing stone patio right now. We're just proposing the pool right off the existing patio. The site has evergreen screening.
do you have plans you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I have a plan. I can share my screen.
Okay.
Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. So we have an existing patio right now in the rear yard, and we're proposing the swimming pool right off the existing stone patio. It's a standard 20 by 40 in-ground swimming pool with a spot on the interior of the pool. We're just proposing a little bit of new patio on both sides so you can easily enter the spot in the shallow end. The property already has existing evergreen screening along both side yards and the rear yard. We are proposing a 4-foot high pool compliant fence along this side of the property, and then around this, and then a chain link 4-foot high fence along the side yard. The rear of the property has a 6-foot high concrete existing stone wall that we'd like to use as part of our pool enclosure. And then we're proposing a chain link fence along the right side property, and then aluminum picket pool code fence to attach to the house as part of the enclosure. In terms of stormwater, unfortunately, our engineer couldn't be here, but he plans on taking in the water with drain inlets within the lawn and then piping them to an in-ground Coltech system. And then we're proposing an underground propane tank to attach to our pool filter for the heater. The pool filter is located in the rear of the property, and it meets all required setbacks and screening. The existing trees here have a lot of existing evergreen shrubs underneath them. So the pool filter will also be screened from any neighboring properties. And that's really the extent of it.
Okay. Pretty straightforward. KRF, Ashley, you did a memo for us that went through the pool code, chapter 300, and a couple of other things. There's some comments on some additions to the some of the sheets in the submission. Do you want to comment on this at all?
Yes, I would say overall our comments were pretty minor. We just needed to verify that some of the things like the filter were outside of the setback. We needed to see a calculation, I believe, of the development coverage within the rear yard. and just confirmation on whether or not any lighting is proposed. But the proposed project is a type 2 action under seeker, and we recommend that the board classify it as such this evening.
Okay. Thank you. And there were some comments also from the consulting engineer with regards to the stormwater management and some of the other issues. John, do you want to just highlight some of the comments? I'm assuming, Ms. Lawfer, you received the copies of the memos?
Yes, I have all 3 copies. I've reviewed them with our engineer as well, and we plan on addressing them for our submission to the building and engineering department.
Okay.
The design was well prepared. My comments are minor in nature. Most of them are addressing notes and requirements that have to be within the SWIP. And if our comments are addressed, I find that the design is satisfactory and meets the conditions of the stormwater regs.
Okay, so it sounds like we just have some minor comments, things for you to clean up. You also have a memo from the landscape architect. Susan, is there anything that you want to comment on? It's the memo is pretty straightforward. Is there anything you want to add or highlight?
Yes, I think that it's important to include the landscaping that's at the front of the property due to the construction entrance and tree protection being noted on the plans. And there are a number of trees in the front of the property that aren't shown on the landscape plan. They are on the survey, but it's important that all the information be in one place.
Are you planning on removing any trees to construct the pool, or is it open lawn now?
No, we are not removing any trees right now. It's an open flat lawn, so we will include all trees and shrubbery that are in the front yard, and we'll show any required tree protection as well.
Okay. All right, that's pretty straightforward then as far as what we need and what you need to do. Do you have any questions for us?
No, I think I'm good. Are there any more questions for me?
Okay, well, if you want to take the plan down, I'll see if any members of the planning board have any questions for you. Anybody have any questions on this? This was pretty straightforward. Doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so tonight we need to type this for SEQA because it's meets the conditions as a private house for type 2 action. I need a motion to type this as a type 2 action.
So moved.
Second.
You two are quite the team tonight. Okay.
Establishing a rhythm.
Right. Okay, let's vote. Let's mix it up. I'll start with somebody else now. James.
Yes.
Ellen.
Yes.
It depends on where you all are on my screen. Cindy?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, you have your homework assignment. And as with the previous applicant, the sooner you get it back to us, the sooner we can finish this up and move you on to your permitting process with the building inspector.
Okay, very good. So we revise our plans and then we have to come back to the next meeting. Is that how it works?
If you can get them into us, Brittany, if they were to quickly revise their plans, when would they have to get them in if they want? Could we like get them in on the 23rd, or would they have to shoot for the 6th of April?
No, it would have to be this. I mean, today was the cutoff. That would be up to you, but today was a submission for supplemental. So.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll submit for the next meeting and then be here for the April meeting.
Yeah, the first meeting in April, which I think is April 6th, the first Wednesday in April, or second Wednesday.
That would. Yeah, that would mean that those items are due March 23rd.
Okay.
Okay. He's got this down pat. Okay.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the last minute addition to the agenda. The planning board just needs to have a short discussion about what happened at 886 and 888 Oriental Avenue after they left us. Frank called me yesterday. There was a meeting yesterday between the village and the applicants with regards to moving forward. And Frank asked for the planning board's opinion on something. So I'm gonna turn this over to Frank. And I didn't know anything about what was going on, so this was new news to me. But then when I called Teresa to tell her, it wasn't new news to her. So if Teresa wants to add anything, because she was involved in the discussions in a limited way to bring us up to date with, you all may remember that 886 was before us multiple times in the past couple of years, a subdivision and then an annexation and then another subdivision, and then a swimming pool application, which is the last thing that they were before us for. They took, 886 took the back of the 888 lot, and then they came to us for an application for a swimming pool and a new SWIP and a new site plan and whatnot. And then what happened, Frank?
So just to recap historically, this board approved the site plan for the swimming pool construction. And they started with the construction, the reconstruction of the accessory structure, which was the pool house. And they still have a valid building permit for the pool house, and they are working on that now. What happened was the contractor kind of overstepped the approval that they had for the site plan, and they were supposed to only enter the site from the 886 parcel. And at one point they were entering from the 888 parcel. So the Sigelows actually own both parcels, one personally in their own names, and that's the 886 parcel, and they also own the 888 parcel in an LLC. So they are desirous of starting this pool now, and they felt that yes, the contractor did overstep his approval, but they've put the entrance the way it was supposed to be, the way the site plan was approved across their 886 of the front of that house, and they haven't impacted that 88 parcel any further. I did get information from their engineer about what they were planning. Originally, they were talking about just using it as a construction entrance, and he was going to design stormwater for that construction entrance. That never happened. They also brought some fill onto the 888 lot, which I did get the information of the amount of fill and its origin and all that. So I did get what I asked for, but I still felt that it's up to the planning board to make the decision whether I should issue this building permit for the pool only, which was the site plan, which is what you approved.
So they didn't follow the site plan that we had approved, and they didn't follow it by building a construction entrance through the 888 lot and bringing fill into 888 in order to do so. Is that correct? Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes, basically, yeah.
Okay, so once somebody doesn't follow an approved site plan, they have to come back to the planning board for a revised site plan by code.
Right. So what they're suggesting is that, and what I had said to them is if we were to issue this building permit for the pool now, and we left that permit open, and we wouldn't close that out permit until you return to the planning board and address all the issues that the planning board may have with the liberties that they took, what I'm calling liberties, on the 888 parcel. So that's what the meeting, that's how we ended the meeting. It was the other day, it was the day before yesterday, I believe, that they would return to the planning board and they would address the planning board's questions and comments and address everything, but they'd like to start their pool now.
So if, I mean, the issuance of a permit really is your responsibility. But if you would issue a permit to allow them to begin construction of the pool, but quote, hold the permit open, does that mean they don't get a C of O and they can't use the pool until they come back? Or would they be using the pool all summer?
Well, they wouldn't get a CO, a certificate of compliance for that pool, no. Whether they would use it or not, that's a different.
Well, let's get real.
Well, I'm particularly concerned about the fill. So, I mean, if we remember, the back of that site is very wet. I think there was a lot of conversation about they said it would be a modest amount of fill. Obviously, they need more fill. We don't know.
There was more fill, and after John's comments, they cut the amount of fill down. But now it seems like they brought in fill that wasn't part of the plan.
Right, and so that's my concern, is that the neighbors are going to get flooded, and that's a serious consideration. You're not supposed to flood your neighbors with what you do, and I think it's sort of, I would hate to see them go ahead, build the pool, and then find out that they can't accommodate the stormwater changes. That wouldn't be a good result for anybody. So I would think they would need to come back for a planning board review of what now they really are doing and see if that passes muster, and then they can start construction. It would be a very expensive exercise to do it in reverse, potentially, or we're just, a paper tiger and a rubber stamp, and why are we bothering?
So in regards to the fill, so you had approved, I think, a 240 yards or something, a small amount of fill for the back of the property where that pool is. And I think they've delivered that amount of fill to the back of the property. It's the front of the property that's the problem. But if you also recall that property, originally a woman builder was going to build on it. She had a permit for a foundation. She installed a 2-foot high retaining wall that really has protected the neighbor to the right of that. So although they brought fill in for that 888, I'm not sure that in itself would flood the neighbors. I think it's actually a better condition than it was there before. What was there before was a water basin that used to flood out all the time.
Yeah, but it wasn't, I'm sorry, Frank, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It wasn't the neighbor on the side on Orienta. It was the neighbor who's actually on Skibo that backs up to the property, where I think the particularly large depression that would pond on a regular basis. So maybe the retaining wall helps the person on the right-hand side when you're facing the property, but I don't know, based on the slope, I don't know which way that water would be going.
To bring the fill into the back of that property where the pool house and the pool is going to be, they built a retaining wall along that back wall also. And so I'm not sure that even the ski boat property would flood out at this point. And the back of the property, I don't think has anything to do with the front. I'm more concerned with what in the front, actually.
I think we don't know enough, certainly you may, but I don't think the planning board knows enough about, where this water is going and where the fill's going and how it impacts everything. And, it's kind of bad precedent to, why do we do site plans if people aren't going to follow them?
And can I pop in here a second? So, so Frank is asking the planning board for its recommendation, essentially, because Frank is the person that has the authority to make the decision whether to issue the permit to construct the pool or not. Under section 342-74 of the code, it says that no building permit may be issued for any building within the purview of this article except in conformance with an approved site development plan. And no certificate of occupancy may be issued for any building or use of land unless the building is constructed or used, or the land is developed or used in conformity with an approved site development plan. So the code is pretty clear on this point, that when you are required to come to the planning board to get a site development plan approved, that you're thereafter required to follow the site development plan that is approved. Because otherwise, as Cindy said, what are we doing here? And I think that when you look at the issue of stormwater grading and those types of issues, the question is really how has this change affected the conclusions that Mr. Kellard previously reached with respect to stormwater. Now, if no site development plan is required, Frank still has John look at this stormwater and all those issues as part of the engineering function for the village. But, you know, it's the planning board's decision, informed by its experts, that holds. You guys make the decision. You're not paper tigers, you make the decision. And the applicant in this case had the opportunity to switch back to fix what they had done in order to just comply with the site plan, okay? And so what you have here is you have a change particularly related to a construction entrance, which is a really important issue. John looks at those construction entrances. We all look at them to see, do they affect trees? Do they affect landscaping? Do they affect grading? Do they cause compaction that's going to cause a stormwater problem? You know, all that stuff, if you will. So just so you know, you're free to make whatever recommendation you want to Frank. But I do believe that it is not inconsequential in terms of setting a precedent.
And we can make a recommendation to Frank, but Frank basically is the decider.
Yes, Frank is the decider. He's the building inspector. That's correct.
Right. Well, they're going to have to come back to us at some point in time. It's the question of, should they be coming before they start the construction of the pool, or before they get full use of the pool legally? I mean, I don't doubt that if that pool is there and it's a hot day and there's no C of O, that there are going to be people in the pool.
I think it's a question of compliance with the law. They have to come back before construction starts.
Are we allowed to take any comments from, there is the lawyer here for the owners of the property?
No,
Okay.
we don't need any
Just
comments
checking.
from them. We know what they did. They owned up to it. They didn't follow the site plan. They didn't follow the code. I think they were actually cited and a stop work order was given or something, right, Frank? I mean, I think they know what they did. It's a question, though, of how we proceed from here. We can't change the past. We can only go forward. So Richard and Cindy have made their how they feel clear.
Kathy, can I just make a suggestion that you give the attorney a chance to talk, since we did put them on the agenda and they are here, you know? It doesn't mean it's going to affect the outcome, but just from a due process perspective, if he's here, I would advise you to let him speak.
All right, well, before we do that, the applicant, the owners of the property, since it's legally under two separate names, made a big deal about us separating out the addresses on the agenda. So there's listed twice, which is fine. I mean, the only time it was ever listed together was when we did the subdivision to break that formally one property into two properties.
And Kathy, I would just say about that, we're obviously using the two properties together as one, and that's what gave rise to the problem in the first place. So
Right.
I don't see what point they were trying to make there.
Right, well, whatever. But because now something has been done to 888, is there anything that we need to do with the driveway and the construction entrance and the improvement that was done on 888 without any kind of site plan review at all? Is there anything that this falls under?
They would have to come back for the site plan changes on on both because the changes that they made on 888 were related to the work that was going on 886. So the fact that it's owned by a different party theoretically should be irrelevant.
Right, right. Well, it's the same people. It's just a different legal construct. Okay.
Was the owner willing to completely restore the disturbance on 888 to its original condition?
I'm sure they would. They made the point that there was an existing driveway to that 888 parcel. There might have been a house there years ago. I'm not exactly sure.
There's one property with a big house in the middle.
Yeah, so there was a driveway that was existing, but they went beyond that, you know, they went all the way back. Now they own.
We elevate the attorney at this point in time, and maybe that person can answer these questions for us. And maybe explain whatever it is that they want to explain to us. Okay, you're elevated. Would you like to start your video so we can see you and your audio? Person Weckstein.
Hello,
Yes, is your video working?
I'm trying. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Adam Weckstein from Hockerman, Tortorella and Weckstein. We do think that the distinction between these lots does make a difference. You approved the site plan for 886. The client did use 888, or the client's contractor used 888 as access, which was a mistake. We are committed to complying with the site plan that you approved for 886. To the extent there's disturbance on 888, because it's over half an acre in area, we do need site plan approval for the work that's done there. And the commitment that was made to Frank and your town's attorney and the village manager at the meeting yesterday was that we would come in promptly with a site plan application for 888. I believe that they are legally separate lots. I believe the only one you approved the site plan for was 886, and I don't believe there is a basis to resort to those provisions of the code which basically put things on hold when there's a violation as to a particular piece of property. They are owned separately by different entities. And again, they weren't both subject to your approval. And we're not asking to have free rein here. What we're asking is that we are able to go along with the methodology that was agreed to yesterday and get back to you, probably not this coming meeting, but the meeting after, for a site plan for 888. There are no plans to improve it at this point with a building or any kind of structure. I will say that the driveway, if you look back on the various plans, including the subdivision that created the original lots, that driveway is there. Now, again, there was disturbance. There was a little fill on that lot. That does require site plan on 888.
So Mr. Weckstein, I just have to understand this. I understand the difference in the legal title of the two lots. I do appreciate that. What I don't understand is that once you use 888, you wouldn't have used 888 but for the improvements being done on 886. So it kind of functionally has merged those lots, because 888 would be in the same condition was 886 not being improved. So I appreciate your arguments, but I just don't, I have a hard time seeing them as totally separate when one was used for the other. And if it was in completely independent, third party, arm's length ownership, that never would have happened.
Well, number one, that's not necessarily true because there could have been permission, but it's closed off now. And we're committed to using 886 independently. I don't think there is any merger. I appreciate the merger doctrine, but in this context, I don't believe that's what happened here, particularly since, again, that is shut off now. If you go out to that site, there's no access. There's a fence there. It's boarded up. And at the end of the day, there isn't impervious surface that was put out there. There has been some grading, and that was a mistake, legally a mistake. But in light of the commitments we're making, I believe that the solution your building inspector agreed to, again, with the village manager and the attorney present, is the appropriate one. And legally, I think it's the one that is most supportable. And I'm not giving you legal advice. Obviously, it's your own attorney.
Okay, Mr. Weckstein, my understanding from what you just said is that you're coming back, you're coming to the planning board at some point in time with a site plan for 888, but not a revised site plan for 886. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're complying with the site plan for 886. As we go ahead, that's if we have the permit to go ahead, we are bound by it.
Right. So the construction entrance that was created and is now fenced off from 888 to 886 had no impact at all on areas of 886 that were not included in the area of disturbance. Is that what you're telling us? How do we know that?
I don't have the expertise to tell you that. I think Frank would be in a better position. Our engineer's not on, but it is my understanding. And again, 886, the work did stop, as you noted, and was stopped. So it's in the middle of being done. But my understanding is we will comply with that site plan, or otherwise we do have to come back to you on 886. We are coming back to you one way or another on 888. We will be before you, probably not at the next meeting. You know, I don't think we can meet the April deadline, but I think we would shoot for the following one.
So Mr. Weckstein, on 886, the change that you made was you crossed into the site at a new location, and that you've since blocked off. But I guess I don't see how you would get a truck from 888 onto 886 without impacting an area that was previously not supposed to be impacted in the pool construction and the pool house construction. John, do you recall the stormwater plan that you reviewed in the area of disturbance that was approved?
You're throwing, I mean, you know.
No, I'm just asking if he.
I can bring up the plans on.
That would be helpful.
Hold on a second. Let me see. I just hold on.
I think the stormwater was going to be added to the original 886 house stormwater. It was going to be.
That's correct. And the construction access was from the driveway at 886.
Right.
Across the rear yard.
Right.
So what we're trying to get at is, was there an area of the lot 886 differently disturbed than was allowed under the original site plan? That's kind of the question.
Yeah, I'm just not aware of the disturbance that has taken place on 888 into 886 because I haven't been to the site.
Fair enough.
But your site plan doesn't necessarily govern grading at any particular moment. The point is it has to be graded to meet the topo that you've approved, and the improvements have to be where they're supposed to be. So long as the sediment and erosion control measures are in place while the work is being done. Even if there were some minor change in the grade over there, it has to be put back as part of what we're doing, as part of the work.
I guess what I'm saying is it depends on the limits of disturbance and whether they were expanded outside the area that was approved by the site plan.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
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 This is the latest site plan that I have. Here's Oriente Avenue. Let me enlarge it,
Thanks.
and hopefully we'll be able to read it. Okay, so here's 888 down here. Here's 886. Here's the back of 888 where the pool was going to go. The topo lines sort of go in here a little bit to that, and here's a stone masonry wall here. If I remember correctly, the old entrance to the property when it was a single lot, it was more towards this end here somewhere. So the driveway must be around here. So the entrance to the site had to be coming in along here, which is not obviously anywhere near where we had approved it. You know, if I had my druthers, I'd druther we'd do a review of the SWIP and the site plan for 886 again, but follow the code. There had to be some impact on this area here. Let me see if I can. I'm not. These aren't my drawings. Let me see if I have some drainage drawings, but that's not going to be helpful. Let's see what is further down on this particular set of plans.
I'm kind of having trouble seeing it. I don't know if it's my
blurry. Yeah, it's blurry. I mean, you just, this is a site plan. Here's where the pool was. So here's the pool here. This is where the pool.
Yeah, I'm not seeing exactly where you're pointing to on the screen. I don't know if anybody else is.
Kathy, do you want me to share my screen? I found the plan as well.
Who's that?
Ashley.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay. Okay, so this is the site plan. The original approval had the construction driveway coming in here. The limits of disturbance are outlined by this hatch line. So there probably was a small, in this area here where the driveway probably came in from 888, it probably did cross a little bit into an area that wasn't previously part of the limits of disturbance. But as you can see, the limits of disturbance almost went to the property line, so it wouldn't have been that much.
Depending on where the driveway is.
Yeah, depending on where the driveway came in.
If the driveway is more down at the bottom of the site, then it's a much larger.
Let me just see if I can see if there's something I can scale it with. This is 25 feet, so it would be, it's probably like, if it came in here, it's probably like 10 feet.
Well,
our main concern is
questions here. Do we need a revised site plan for 886? The applicant was not proposing to do that. They were just proposing to come in with one for 888. And are they linked? Which they appear to be, because the area disturbances goes from 888 into 886. And should that be done before they get the permit for the pool construction? But again, Frank, you can give a permit without us stopping you. That's totally up to you. But I don't want to speak for the entire board. I don't know, Seamus or Ellen, if you have anything to add, or let us know how you feel about this. My preference would be, like with Richard and Cindy, is to look at the site plan again before they were allowed to build the pool. I mean, they're here because they did this themselves. This isn't our fault. This is they didn't follow the site plan. So this is what the code says, and the code says it for a reason. but this is just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's my preference as well, because we don't really know until we review it again what's been done. So
What the impact is of what's been.
what the impact is. So
Right.
I feel we would need to review it again.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with the original application, but I'm very sensitive to fill in, anywhere in Mamaroneck, probably particularly floodplains or down in Orienta. And maybe there's legal analysis that I'm not completely clear on, but it seems like you have to follow the site plan, because if I see no reason for an exception.
Right, so if you guys would like to make a formal recommendation to Frank, and it is, I stress, just a recommendation, I would say, somebody make a motion and then you can take a vote on it.
Okay, so I need a motion to make a recommendation, and again, it's just recommendation. Frank, you're responsible for permit issuance, so this is just the recommendation of the planning board, and I understand you had a meeting with the village attorney and the village manager and the applicant yesterday. We understand that, but as everyone knows, the land use boards are independent of the village management and the process. We go by the code and by the laws that govern planning boards. So I need a motion then to recommend to the building inspector that the permit for the pool not be issued until a site plan review of 886 and 888 either coordinated in one review, or two submissions that are reviewed together be completed, or at least started, so we can get a sense of what we're dealing with here.
So moved.
Would it make a difference, would it make a difference to the board if they were to submit promptly a site plan for both pieces of combined site plan, as to your opinion of getting a pool permit?
Would it make a difference if they submitted?
A combined site plan for both sites, even though it's separate owners?
I think we need some sort of combination to see, because it is, it's together. Whatever was done to both properties, and it impacts both properties. From a legal standpoint, and Teresa, maybe you can answer this question, do they have to be two separate site plans? Could it be two separate site plans that are merged because of the legal ownership of the properties?
Honestly, it sounds like their intention now is not to use the two properties together. That was the temporary thing based on their contractor not paying attention to their site plan. So, and of course, it's the property owner's responsibility to control their contractor. So I don't think it matters to the planning board whether they do a site plan for 888 or a site plan for 886 separately or together. I would leave that up to the applicant, but I do think you need to see what was changed on 886 so that you can know that there's no stormwater or other implications related to that. On 888, we just know nothing about what's been left there. So it's hard to draw any conclusion about it currently.
I think it's a good suggestion to put both of them on there, to put them to bed, to show the 886. For the most part, you're complying with the 886 site plan, as you've said, but I would show both of them. And this way, there's no question, and the planning board has all the information they need to make a decision.
Yeah. See, again, I think that if we have an engineer go out there and explain what's out there and what's going to be done, we frankly don't need site plan approval for 886. If we would expedite the process of getting the pool permit, then I understand, but it's an observable condition out in the field.
Okay,
The planning board doesn't make determinations about site plans in the field. They make them in planning board meetings in public. And that's just a transparency that's required by the open meetings law. So, you know, I think what the planning board is, I think there's a motion on the table by Kathy and
I think by Cindy.
oh, by Cindy. I'm so sorry, Cindy.
Right.
So you're looking for a second.
Site plan submission for both properties, either separately or together.
Okay.
That we can at least gauge by with the contractor's action had any impact on 886. Once we see the paperwork, if there was no impact on 886, we can then say we don't need to do any revised site plan, but we don't know where the trucks went and how they entered the property until somebody is able to put it on paper and show us. Okay.
I think you need a second.
Okay, and there's the second. Okay. So,
Do you mind restating the motion?
okay, let's see if I can do
Because
it.
I think it's probably
Make
concise.
a recommendation to the building inspector that he not issue the pool construction permit until the applicant submits to the planning board site plan applications for both 886 and 888 Orient Avenue, either separately or together. Okay, now, once we get to submission, the planning board can determine whether or not we need to do a site plan review of 886. If there was no change to the area of disturbance and no impact on stormwater, then we can make that determination, and then the pool permit can be issued while we continue our review with 888. Does that sound like a good plan? I see Ted shaking. Okay, so once we start the site plan review of 888, we will just complete it simultaneously, if assuming nothing has to happen to 886, but I don't know that for sure. I don't know where the driveway came in. I don't know where the area of disturbance was, and that needs to be indicated on the new site, the revised site plan, that this area was disturbed. It's no longer being disturbed, but it was disturbed. And then the 888, we need to know where the fill went, why the fill went. We don't need to know why the fill went, where the fill went, you know, and what's the condition of the property before and after. We have to, the site plan has to be back from the previous condition before the disturbance was done and the fill was added. Okay. All right. Does that, okay?
Yeah. I mean, in the form of a recommendation, it makes sense to me. I was kind of thinking that it's more recommendation that the pool permit's not issued until 886 is reviewed. 888 is maybe up to the,
right.
But
888
as a recommendation, unless anyone has any thoughts about that, I'm just trying to make it kind of, you know, very tied and concise, but I'm good. So
it's complicated. Okay. All right. Are we good? Everybody understands it well enough in order to vote? And Teresa, you're comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's take the vote then. Richard?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Seamus?
yes.
And I vote yes as well. Now, Frank, this is just a recommendation. If you so choose, you can go forward with the plan that was discussed yesterday with the village and the applicants. Or you can wait and do this, but you know, we can't tell you what to do. In other words, we all have our lanes and we stay in them.
understood.
Okay. All right.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. All right, I need a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Kathy, I did want to let you know, there was a little edit. I don't know if it matters. I already emailed the applicants, but the next meeting is the 13th of April. So
The
due dates would be the 30th. It wasn't the 6th, it's the 13th.
Okay.
But I emailed everybody, but
Okay.
It's my bad. I had that on some stuff.
Well,
I'm
when I
sorry.
said that could not be the second, but I got the sixth off.
Second Wednesday, yeah.
The sixth off of a paper
I just
that.
didn't want to make everyone nervous.
So I just went with that, but it couldn't possibly be the second.
I went with it too, so.
I mean, the 8th could be the second Wednesday. That's the earliest date they could.
You know what? I looked at the conference call on my calendar.
I know, I just went 2 weeks back and I assumed, but I just had double checked.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's getting close to Easter. I think that's the Wednesday for Easter. Getting close to my sister's birthday. That's how I know that. Okay. All right. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, let's do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Okay,
This was
good
a
night.
Very good meeting.